Hi, I'm Michael Steinman of Jazz Lives. I have the very good fortune to be sitting in the Berkeley, California home of Jim Branson, who went to high school with and was a dear friend of the cornetist George Finola. And Jim says he has lots of stories about George. When did you first meet George? What do you remember?
I enrolled in a small private school in Chicago when I was in 7th grade called the Harvard School for Boys on the South Side, 47th and Ellis, in the same neighborhood where Barack Obama's house is, Hyde Park. And he was already enrolled there. And a very small class, was in class from all the way through high school. There were 13 boys in our graduating class. And I didn't know him all that well until he was about maybe 16 years old, probably a junior. He when he discovered Big Spiderbeck and the cornet, he had a piano in his house, and he had played piano from the time he was 3 by ear. He had perfect pitch. In other words, hear a note, you can name it. Sound familiar? It's just like the story of Big Spiderbeck, isn't it? 3 years old. This child prodigy on the piano. And someone played a Bix record for him. I'm not sure who. It might have been an older friend of his name, Will Severin. And he just glommed onto the whole jazz idea with incredible passion and began proselytizing to all of his classmates. And I was one of those who came under his aegis.
So he blossomed very fast because
I'm extremely fast. Let me tell you.
Just what's behind you now is the cover of a record that we're listening to. And how old was he when he made this?
19 or 20. It was 1965.
Okay, so from 16 to 20, he became a master.
Faster than that. He went and got a pawn shop cornet. And his bedroom was in the back of the apartment where they lived in South Shore in Chicago. And he hid in the closet put a mute over the cornet and taught himself to play the cornet by ear. He never did learn to read music. He didn't need to. And he began playing at school, dances and stuff. In his senior year, I have a photograph here. I don't know if you can see it. And there's George with a little high school band at our high school during our senior year, with his head bent over in the manner of Big Spiderbeck.
So this is about 1961 or so?
63.
Okay.
62 or 63.
And you said George also edited this book?
Yeah, this was our yearbook from that year, 1963. Harvard, it was called Harvard St. George School, that had been bought out, merged with another school. The funny thing that I remember was when he would be playing at these little dances and stuff, people would ask him how long he'd been playing, and he'd say, 2 years. How long have you been playing cornet? He'd say, 2 years. And they'd say, you're lying, you've been playing all your life, you're just trying to say that to make yourself sound better. And the actual time was 6 months.
Wow.
Picked it up that fast. So he started spreading the gospel of jazz to all his friends, and we all know. Gosh, here's in this picture. There's a good friend of ours named Kosti Gikas, became a lawyer later on, playing a trombone. I saw him recently. He still lives in Chicago. He described the experience that we all had. He said, I got the trombone, I got the case and the slide oil and all the mutes, and I had everything you need except the ability to play. I had the same experience. I too got a trombone, tried to play. George was trying to teach us all how to play, but he thought we should all learn the way he did. He didn't realize that none of us had that innate talent that he had. None of his friends could learn that. I never learned to play whatsoever. I still have the trombone somewhere. But he would hold like seminars in his bedroom, and I used to go like virtually every night my senior year in high school, and several of us did, into his bedroom where he collected just a tremendous amount of records, got acquainted with Bob Kester's record shop on the Near North Side. It was called Delmar Records at the time, now Delmark. Would hang out there, and where he would play Bix records and Louis Armstrong records, and he just soaked up all this knowledge and would tell us all about all this stuff. And he gave me, he gave me a lifelong interest in this. It's like the only thing I listen to is jazz of that stripe. Put red cloth over the lights, keep the lights down low, and listen to Bix in a Mist or different Bix records, and just hear the emotion that came out of Bix's horn. I remember seeing a movie that Louis Armstrong was in with him once, and came out of the movie, and he said, "So what did you think of what Louis played?" And I said, "Well, I think I remember some of it." He said, "I remember every note." So we took a trip, our senior year at spring vacation, 1963, spring of 1963, to New Orleans. Our whole class got on a train and went down to New Orleans from Chicago. And he brought his horn. He carried it around in a velvet bag like Bix did. Mm-hmm. And he got asked to sit in. We went to Preservation Hall with George Lewis, Kid Howard, Jim Robinson. And they liked him. They said they did. They knocked him out, you know. And boy, that was it for him. So after we graduated from high school, I came out to Berkeley to go to school. He went to Vanderbilt. 1 year, Nashville. And I remember I went to visit him some occasion there in his dorm in Vanderbilt, and he was in the marching band. But he was not the lead trumpet in the marching band because he couldn't read. He was the second trumpet. So you had to, somebody would play his part and he'd memorize it immediately. It was like when he was sitting in at Preservation Hall. If it was a song he didn't know, he'd listen to the first chorus and then he could play it just fine. And he formed a little band at Vanderbilt, and he played me some tapes for that band. And boy, if they didn't sound like Bix and the Wolverines to me. And I'm just wondering if those tapes exist somewhere of that band that he had when he was 18 years old in Nashville. After his freshman year, he dropped out and moved to New Orleans, became a professional musician, and he remained there for the rest of his life. He died in the year 2000. And I went to visit him a number of times in New Orleans. He became the acting director of the New Orleans Jazz Museum, which at the time was on 2 Main Street in New Orleans. And his assistant was Danny Barker, the great guitarist, banjo player who was a New Orleans native, had gone to New York and played in Cab Calloway's band, and had come back to New Orleans, where he gained some fame in later years because he managed to spread the gospel of the roots of New Orleans music throughout high schools, and was a well-beloved figure in New Orleans. And I bailed around with George Finola and Danny Barker for about 10 days on one trip down there. George was playing at the time, one of the visits, I've made several visits down there, at the pizza place called the Red Garter, which was on St. Peter and Bourbon. It's right across the street from where the Maison Bourbon is now, just up the block from Preservation Hall. And that was great. He was all these banjos, and for there they had a Dixieland band. He was living upstairs in an apartment upstairs from the club with his girlfriend. And here I came from Berkeley. This must have been late 60s, early 70s, I can't remember. And being from Berkeley, you know, I brought the marijuana. And we would go up there after they played. Every night we would go up and sit on his balcony up after 2 in the morning and watch the drunks wander through the streets trying to find their way back to their hotels. The drunken tourists was their favorite sport, get loaded. So I kind of lost contact. Oh gosh, when I went away to college, he made me tapes of every Bix record. He had almost everything before all the albums came out that had everything in chronological order. I already had them because he collected them all. Anyway, I kind of lost contact with him during the later '70s, and I wrote him a letter. At one point, must have been late '70s or something, and I didn't get an answer. I didn't think anything of it. About a year later, I get a call from him. This is about 1981. Get a call from him. Jim, I'm so sorry. I just found out about this letter. I've got something to tell you. I'm gay. And I went, yeah, that makes sense. You're like he was always nuts about Ethel Waters. Other people couldn't quite see that. It kind of made sense. And you sent a letter to a place where I was living, where I had broken up with my boyfriend, and he just broke down and told me that he opened your letter and he thought that I was an old flame of yours or something, and he kept it from me, and he just broke down and confessed. and my wife at the time was passed on and had numerous friends in the city of San Francisco who were gay, and this was the time the AIDS crisis was striking people down. And so I inquired about his health, and he said, well, he did have problems with his T cells, but that he was in treatment and things were looking better. So we went to visit him in 1983, Linda, my first wife, and I, in New Orleans, and just had a wonderful visit. He was playing at the Blue Angel on Bourbon Street, where he played for a number of years. It was like 13 years. He led a little band there. Jazz of the Chosen Few. He was like a big fan of it, still big, great trombone and stuff. And he took me into his. We were visiting him in his apartment after hours. He walked to work every day, and he brings out a cornet, an old battered cornet from a drawer. He handed it to me, and I said, "You know what that is?" "No, that's the cornet Louis Armstrong learned to play on." Now, I didn't ask how he got it, but I did remember that he'd been involved with the New Orleans Jazz Museum at an earlier time. Well, after he died in December of 2000 at age 55, probably of AIDS. I'm not sure what it was. I've never heard exactly what the story was. His sister, who inherited his estate, I'm pretty sure sold that cornet, and whoever bought it contributed to the Smithsonian in Washington. And you can go now to the Smithsonian Museum of History, I guess, American History Museum, and see that cornet that Louis Armstrong learned to play on it. And I looked at it, I actually hold that cornet in my hands. And then I told the story to Dave Boatinghouse, who was a pianist from New Orleans and knew George very well later in life. When I talked to him, he said, that wasn't Louis Armstrong's cornet.
There is some controversy.
That was a good story. So let's see. So our high school was 47th and Ellis. Now this neighborhood between 47th and 51st Street on the south side of Chicago was a unique neighborhood in the city of Chicago because Chicago was very, very segregated. Every neighborhood had its own ethnicity, and black folks didn't live where white folks lived in the city of Chicago. But in this one neighborhood, which was just north of the University of Chicago, it was integrated. And it was also the neighborhood where the industrialists of an earlier age had built their lakefront homes, vacation homes. So there was big mansions in there. By the time we went to school in the late 50s and 60s, most of these mansions had been turned into apartments. Just north of 47th Street, the neighborhood was a black neighborhood. So that was like the dividing line. So we used to hang out at a drugstore right at the corner of 47th and Ells, right on the dividing line. And I wonder if I can find this picture here. Oh, that's what is it? Sorry to take it. This drugstore we would go eat lunch at. The pharmacist was a modern jazz musician. His name was Grady Johnson. And there's a great picture. There it is. I wonder if you can see that. Great picture of all of us in our senior class at the drugstore where we hung out. And there's George in the back there with Grady and his assistant, his waitress. So we talked to, we knew all kinds of people. This is like Aretha Franklin was like, down the street at this time as singing gospel. We used to go to, I can't remember the name of the place, and near our side, it wasn't the Blind Pig, but it was another place that Bob Kester did Tuesday night shindigs, where he would bring up all these blues musicians from Mississippi, jug bands and Sleepy John Estes, and I remember going down the basement one day with George, and there was little brother Montgomery playing on the piano. I was like, whoa, listening to him rehearse for the longest time. And there was always one white guy in the background, young guy playing the rhythm guitar. Didn't think much of him. And as I came to Berkeley next year, and I went to my first psychedelic rock concert, 1964, I guess it was, at Harmon Gym here in Berkeley, and it was Jefferson Airplane before Grace Slick. It was Signe Anderson, and the other act was the Paul Butterfield Blues Band from Chicago. And who was the lead guitarist? Mike Bloomfield, the same guy I had seen playing nothing but a little rhythm guitar. So I learned to play the jug myself, and we had a little jug. After I got out of college, we had a little jug band here. It was like we had one or two guys who could figure out chords, and we were hit at freight salvage. That was my big claim to fame. But I don't know what else to say. It was funny that he just didn't record much. He made a few records, and from what I've heard from people like Bono Gibson, who also knew him very well, the singer in New Orleans, he was just such a perfectionist that he was afraid to be recorded, so it wasn't perfect. He didn't want people to hear it. Gosh, she told me that she brought him in for a recording session once, and he just couldn't do it. It was just froze up. But if he played if you just heard him in a club, he was just fabulous. So I owe a great debt to George Finola because he gave me a lifetime of appreciation of this wonderful music.
And his music, his sound lives on.
I should hope so. It's sad that few people have heard of him, because outside of New Orleans, if you go down there, everybody's got stories about him. Lucien Barberin, the trombonist, the nephew of Paul Barberin, who plays with Sting. Not Sting, who I think of, Harry Connick, told me that he was playing with him one time, and he mentioned some tune, Weatherbird or something, and Lucien Barberin said, "Gee, I don't know what that is," and George said, "You don't know what that is. You go down to Tower Records and get that record, and you'll learn it." And so the next night, "Did you learn it?" And I still don't know. What? And all the legendary stories down there about him walking home. He would walk to work because he lived in the French Quarter, and they have these handsome cabs, where they get the tourists and the cab, the horse, and they're telling people about the various places, and he goes by a place one night, and he hears the guy say, "And this building here was built in 1642, and George said, "What?" The city wasn't even founded until the 18th century. And the guy said something else, and George corrected him again because he didn't suffer fools. And the guy got out and beat him up. And there were other stories of somebody leaving a cigarette burning in the front row in front of the bandstand. So the smoke was coming into the musicians' eyes. and they was playing at the Maison Bourbon on St. Peter and Bourbon Street. Later in life, I heard this story, and the couple got up and left, and the cigarette was still. And George jumps down from the bandstand, and picks up the cigarette, and follows a couple outside and throws the cigarette. They threatened to beat him up, but apparently he was well connected down there. It was partly of Italian extraction. Apparently he was well connected with the folks in New Orleans, so they protected him pretty well. So everywhere I went down there, when I asked people after he died, Duke Hiker, Dave Boatinghouse, John Royan, the pianist, the bouncer at the Maison Bourbon. What? You went to high school with George Finola? Come here, have a free drink. He's just well beloved down there, and it's kind of a shame that he isn't better known.
Well, I'm hoping through the blog and through the video we've just done, your generous stories, that people who remember him will write in. So
I hope so.
We'll see. We'll start a George Finola renaissance.
Should I put on more? You want to hear more?
No, that's fine.
All right.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Oh, that's all? Okay.
Okay.
No other questions.
Okay.